It happened so fast. The sound of her scream still echoed in the grand living room when Sarah's foot connected with Madame Benis's leg. Thud. Benis fell backward, her shopping bag scattering across the marble floor. For a moment, everyone in the house froze. The billionaire, Mr. Amos, and his friends, the men who called themselves the generals, stopped talking. Their red robes shimmered in the dim light. What? What just happened? One of them hissed, turning sharply toward the door. Sarah, the maid, stood still, her heart beating like thunder in her chest. She had no time to think. No time to explain. She had seen it. The open ritual bowl, the strange chalk symbols drawn on the floor, the burning candle with Benis's name on it. And if she hadn't acted, Madame Benis would have walked right into it. 2 years earlier, Sarah had been working in Mr. Amos's mansion for 3 years. She was 24, poor and quiet. People in Ekiti whispered that she was lucky. After all, how many girls from her village could boast of working in a billionaire's mansion? But deep down, Sarah knew something was off about her boss. He had no real company, no big factory, no oil business. Yet money flowed like water, cars, houses, gold, even the governor respected him. And every month, like clockwork, the generals came to his house. They would all wear red caps, red wrappers, red beads. They arrived at exactly 11:11 p.m. and stayed till 12:09 a.m. No one was allowed near the living room when the meetings were happening. Sarah used to hear faint voices, chanting, deep humming sounds, and sometimes crying. At first, she thought she was imagining things. But the last meeting before that night, she heard someone say something that made her blood run cold. She must not know her role, one of the men had said. When the moon turns, her blood will renew the covenant. Sarah didn't understand it at first, but when she saw her madam's name written on the chalk circle beside a red candle, she understood. That morning, Madame Benis had returned from the market. She was humming, her long red gown flowing as she carried her shopping bags. Her face glowed. She had no idea what danger was waiting for her inside. Sarah was mopping the corridor when she heard voices again. Mr. Amos and his friends, whispering fast and low. "You will have to sacrifice her before the 3rd moon," one said. "She is the chosen vessel," another replied. "If not, your wealth will vanish." Benis stopped. She was right outside the door now. Her hand was on the knob. Sarah's blood froze. "Madam, wait," she whispered sharply. But Benis didn't hear. In that split second, Sarah dropped the mop, ran, and kicked her madam hard on the shin before she could open the door. Benis gasped in pain, fell backward, and the heavy door swung slightly open, enough for Sarah to see the red smoke curling from the ritual bowl. If Benis had stepped in, she would never have come out alive. "Stay quiet if you want to live." Benis's eyes widened. "Sarah, are you mad? You—" But Sarah quickly pressed her hand against her lips and whispered, trembling, "Madam, if you love your life, don't make a sound." Through the small crack in the door, they could see the men kneeling in front of Amos, who sat in a carved wooden chair. There was something on the floor, a picture of Benis, surrounded by white chalk lines and red powder. Benis felt her heart stop. She slowly pulled back from the door, her legs shaking. Sarah held her hand and guided her down the hallway, whispering, "Follow me. Don't talk. Don't even breathe loud." They hid in the guest room, the one Amos never entered. When Benis finally found her voice, it came out small. "Sarah, what did you just save me from?" Sarah swallowed hard. "From your husband, madam." Benis sat on the edge of the bed, trying to breathe. "You're lying," she said weakly. "Amos, he's a kind man. He donates to churches, pays school fees, gives food to the poor." Sarah shook her head. "That's the part the devil loves most, madam. He hides behind goodness." "But last month, I saw him bury something behind the house." Benis looked at her sharply. "Bury what?" Sarah's voice broke. "A goat, or I thought it was a goat. But it had human hair." Benis's hand flew to her mouth. She began to tremble. "Oh God. Oh my God." Then Sarah said something that made her cold all over. "They call themselves the generals. And you are their next offering." Benis's mind raced. She had nowhere to go. Her family was far away in Abuja. And Amos controlled everything, her phone, her car keys, even the house staff. Sarah knelt in front of her. "Madam, you can't act like you know. You must smile. Pretend nothing happened. Tomorrow tell him you're going to make your hair. I'll help you run." Benis's eyes filled with tears. "Why are you helping me, Sarah? You could die for this." Sarah smiled faintly. "Because someone once helped me too, and I didn't get the chance to thank them." The next day, Benis acted perfectly normal. She wore a beautiful yellow gown, kissed Amos on the cheek and said softly, "Darling, I'll be back by evening. I'm just going to the salon." Amos smiled. "All right, my dear." But his smile didn't reach his eyes. Sarah watched from the corridor, praying silently. She had already booked a small hotel for her madam in Ado Ekiti under a fake name, Miss Peace Ease. At 4 p.m., Benis left. At 4:05, Sarah locked herself in her small room, trembling. By 9 p.m., Mr. Amos began to panic. "She's not picking up," he muttered, pacing. "Where is she?" By midnight, the generals arrived, angry, red-clothed, chanting low. "You failed, Amos," one of them hissed. "You were warned." "I'll find her," he shouted. "I'll find her." But it was too late. The clock struck 12:09 a.m., the sacred time of renewal, and the candles blew out on their own. Amos screamed. By morning, people in Ekiti heard shouting near the main road. A man was running barefoot, his red robe torn, his eyes wild. It was Amos. He was shouting names, names of his friends, names of people in power. "They did it. We killed them. We buried them behind the house." Some thought he was drunk. Others pulled out their phones and started recording. One of the videos went viral online. It was titled, "Billionaire Confesses After Losing His Mind, the Generals Exposed." And at that same moment, in a small hotel room far away, Sarah sat beside Benis, watching the video on her small phone. Tears rolled down Benis's face. "Sarah," she whispered, "you didn't just save my life. You saved my soul." Sarah looked at her gently. "No, madam," she said, "you saved mine, when you hired me." But before they could rest, a loud knock came at the hotel door. Boom, boom, boom. Both women froze. "Madam," Sarah whispered, "they found us." The knocks grew louder. Boom, boom, boom. "Open this door," a deep voice thundered from outside. Benis's heart jumped into her throat. She looked at Sarah, terrified. "Sarah, what do we do?" Sarah's eyes darted around the small hotel room. The only window was half open, but it had metal bars. The bathroom was too small to hide in. Then the voice came again, sharper this time. "Madam Benis Amos, we know you're inside. Open this door." Benis froze. "They know my name," she whispered. Sarah grabbed her wrist. "Don't panic yet. Not everyone shouting your name is your enemy." The door burst open suddenly. 2 uniformed policemen stepped in, followed by a third man in plain clothes. He was tall, dark, and serious-looking, with a notebook in his hand. "Mrs. Amos?" he asked calmly. Benis nodded slowly, her voice trembling. "Yes. Please, don't take me back to him. I swear I didn't steal anything." The plain-clothed man raised his hand gently. "Relax, ma'am. My name is Inspector Jide. We're not here to arrest you. We came to protect you." Sarah blinked. "Protect?" Jide turned to her. "You must be Sarah, the maid?" Sarah nodded. The inspector sighed. "You both need to come with us. Your husband, Mr. Amos, was found wandering in the middle of the road at dawn. He's not himself anymore." Benis felt her knees weaken. He's alive?" Jide nodded. "Alive, yes. But he's been saying strange things. Names, rituals, blood, fire. It's all over social media now. People are angry, and some of his so-called friends are already trying to flee town." Benis exchanged a glance with Sarah. Back at the police station, the inspector showed them the video that had been uploaded that morning. In the video, Amos's once handsome face was now wild and sweaty. He was holding a torn red cloth, screaming in the street while people recorded him. "I killed them. The generals. We offered lives for money. We buried our souls," he cried, his voice breaking. Benis covered her mouth, tears spilling down her cheeks. Sarah whispered a prayer under her breath. The inspector paused the video. Do you understand what this means? Your husband's entire empire, his wealth, his charities, everything was built on blood. He's not the only one. There are at least 8 others in that group. We're still tracing them. Benis couldn't believe her ears. So all the schools, the hospitals, the donations were cover-ups, Jide said flatly. We've heard about the generals for years, but we never had proof. Until now. As Benis sat silently, Sarah's hands clenched in her lap. She wanted to speak, to tell the inspector what she'd seen, what she'd overheard, but something held her back. Jide turned to her. You seem nervous, young lady. Did you see or hear anything the night before? Sarah hesitated. Yes, sir, but what? She looked down. If I talk, they'll come for me. Jide leaned forward. Sarah, they can't touch you now. They're being hunted. But your testimony could save more lives. Benis reached for Sarah's hand, squeezing gently. It's okay, you can tell him. Sarah took a deep breath. I saw them last month. They brought a small wooden box. Inside was something wrapped in white cloth. They said it was an offering to renew the covenant. When I peeked, it wasn't a box of money. It was... She stopped. Benis's voice was barely a whisper. What was it, Sarah? Sarah's lips trembled. A child, madam. A small baby. Maybe a week old. Everyone in the room went silent. Inspector Jide's pen dropped from his hand. A child. Sarah nodded slowly. They burned it before my eyes. I hid in the kitchen and prayed. That night, after leaving the station, the inspector gave them a safe apartment in a quiet part of town. They were told not to use their phones and not to open the door to anyone. But peace did not come easily. Benis lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the fire, the blood, and Amos's wild eyes shouting names. She turned to Sarah, who was sitting near the window, watching the dark streets below. You could have died saving me, Benis whispered. Sarah smiled faintly. Sometimes, madam, dying for the truth is better than living in fear. Benis sat up. No, I won't let you talk like that again. When this is over, I'll make sure your life changes. Sarah didn't answer. She just looked out the window, her eyes sad. Around 2:17 a.m., the old landline phone in the apartment started ringing. Tring. Tring. Both women froze. Sarah whispered. Inspector Jide said no one will call us. The phone kept ringing. Benis hesitated, then picked it up slowly. Hello? A deep, slow voice came from the other side. Benis, Amos. You think you can run? Her heart stopped. It was Amos's voice. Amos, she gasped. He laughed, a low, broken laugh. You left me to crumble, but you can't hide from the covenant. They're coming for you both. The line went dead. The silence that followed was heavy, like the air itself was watching. Sarah rushed to the window. Someone's outside. Benis's hands shook as she grabbed her phone despite the warning. The screen flickered, no signal. Outside, a shadow moved near the gate. Then another, then the sound of footsteps. Sarah, Benis whispered, her voice barely steady. What if he's not crazy at all? What if he's right and they're coming? Sarah looked at her madam, her eyes burning with fear and determination. Then, madam, she said quietly, we fight. The footsteps grew closer. The knob turned slowly. Sarah grabbed the iron bar from the curtain stand. The door creaked open an inch. A hand slipped through the gap, wearing a red bracelet. Benis screamed. Sarah swung the rod hard. Thwack. A deep grunt followed, and a man's voice groaned, Wait, stop, it's me. The door swung open fully. It was Inspector Jide, bleeding from his shoulder where the rod had hit him. Behind him were 2 other officers. Sarah dropped the bar, shocked. Oh my God, sir. The inspector winced but forced a smile. You hit like a soldier, he said, pressing a cloth to his shoulder. But you're safe now. We caught one of the men who was watching the gate. He's one of the generals. Benis covered her mouth, tears spilling again. Sarah's heart pounded. They really came for us. Jide nodded grimly. And this is just the beginning. He looked at them both, his expression darkening. Whatever Mr. Amos was part of goes far beyond Akiti. You two have no idea what you've stepped into. The air in the safe house felt heavy after Inspector Jide's words. Sarah and Benis sat frozen, their minds struggling to understand. What do you mean, far beyond Ekiti? Benis asked in a trembling voice. Jide lowered himself onto a chair, wincing as he pressed a bandage over his shoulder. The wound from Sarah's iron rod was still fresh. He gave her a small smile. Don't worry, I've had worse from criminals. You were just protecting your madam. Sarah looked ashamed. I'm sorry, sir. He waved it off. You did what any brave person would. But now listen carefully. Both of you. What I'm about to tell you cannot leave this room. Jide reached into his folder and pulled out several photographs. Blurred images of wealthy men shaking hands, a private jet on a runway, and a red-inked emblem shaped like a triangle with an eye in the center. He placed them on the table. This is the symbol of the generals. They started over 20 years ago, long before Amos joined. Most of the members are businessmen, politicians, and even a few pastors. They meet every month. Same time, same chant, same blood ritual. Benis gasped. My husband, he was part of this for that long. No, Jide said, shaking his head. He joined 8 years ago, right after his business failed. Within 3 months, he became a millionaire. Within a year, a billionaire. But that kind of power comes with a price. Each member renews his wealth through sacrifice. Sarah's eyes filled with horror. Sacrifice, as in human beings. Yes, Benis stood abruptly, her hands shaking, and I was going to be one of them. Jide looked up at her sadly. Yes, ma'am, you were next in line. Benis covered her face and began to sob quietly. Sarah sat still, her mind spinning. Every word from the inspector dug into her like a knife. After a long silence, Jide turned to her. Sarah, I've done some checking. Your name, Sarah Ogunleye. It appeared once before, connected to another incident in Ondo, about 5 years ago. A similar case involving another rich man and sacrifices. Sarah's face went pale. How do you know about that? Benis looked at her, confused. Sarah, what is he talking about? Tears welled in the maid's eyes. Madam, please, let me explain. She took a shaky breath. 5 years ago, I worked for another man, Chief Olawale. He was kind at first, paid well, treated me nicely. But one night I heard cries from the basement. I followed the sound and saw something I should never have seen. His men were performing a ritual and a girl was tied to the floor. I tried to help her, but it was too late. Benis gasped. Oh my God! Sarah continued, her voice breaking. When they saw me, they tried to silence me too. I ran barefoot into the forest. I never went back. The next day, that entire house caught fire. People said it was lightning, but I knew. It was their punishment. Since then, I've been running from job to job, just trying to survive. Jide nodded slowly. So that's why you never gave your full name on the employment form at Amos's house? Sarah looked down. Yes, sir. I was scared. Jide stood and walked toward the small mirror hanging on the wall. Amos had something unusual on his chest when we found him, a scar shaped like a spiral. The doctors said it wasn't a wound, it was carved. He turned to them. Do either of you know if he had that before? Benis shook her head quickly. No, never. He had no scar. Sarah frowned. Wait, sir. I think I saw something once, when I was washing his clothes last year. There was blood on one of his undershirts, right in the middle, like something was cut there. Jide sighed. That spiral mark is what binds him to the group. It means even if one of them dies or goes mad, their power transfers to another. It's why we have to be careful. Killing Amos won't stop them. Someone else will rise. Benis whispered, so the nightmare never ends. Just then the electricity flickered. The room went dark for a second. Sarah jumped. The lights! Jide drew his gun instinctively, moving toward the window. He peered outside but saw nothing. Then his radio crackled. Inspector Jide, come in. You need to get out of there, now. It was a voice from Police HQ. Jide pressed the button. Why? What's happening? The voice replied, hurried and tense. There's been an explosion at the main station. Someone leaked your location. Jide froze. Leaked what? Benis's face drained of color. You mean, they know we're here? Sarah's heartbeat quickened. But how? Only you and your men knew. Jide swore under his breath. One of my men must be working for them. He turned quickly. We have to move, now, through the back. He guided them to the back corridor of the building, gun in one hand, flashlight in the other. The hallway smelled of dust and old paint. They reached a rusty door leading to the back alley. Jide kicked it open. Stay behind me, he ordered. But as soon as they stepped outside, the night exploded with sound, engines roaring, tires screeching, and blinding headlights cutting through the darkness. 3 black SUVs blocked the alley. From the first car, a man stepped out, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a red jacket and dark sunglasses even in the night. Jide raised his gun. Don't move. The man smiled faintly. Inspector, you really think you can stop us? The generals have eyes everywhere. Benis clung to Sarah, whispering, Who is he? Sarah's voice trembled. That's General Cunley. I saw his picture in the files. He's Amos's closest friend. The man's voice was calm, but chilling. Hand them over, Inspector. You can walk away rich. We can pretend this never happened. Jide steadied his aim. You'll have to shoot me first. The man smiled wider. Then that's exactly what will happen. He snapped his fingers. Gunshots erupted, glass shattered. Jide fired back, pulling Benis and Sarah behind a parked car. Stay down, he shouted. Bullets clanged against the metal. Sparks flew. The smell of gunpowder filled the air. Sarah covered her ears, shaking. We're going to die. Jide crawled closer to them, his face set with determination. Not tonight. Not while I'm still breathing. He reached into his pocket and tossed Sarah a small flash drive. Take this. It has everything. Names, places, rituals, photos. If anything happens to me, give it to the press. Promise me. Sarah clutched it tightly, tears streaming down her face. But, promise me. I promise. Jide took a deep breath, peeked from behind the car, and fired again. 2 of the attackers fell, but more poured out from the SUVs. The inspector shouted, Run, go through the alley and don't stop until you reach the bus station. Benis hesitated. What about you? He smiled faintly. Just go. You already saved 1 life tonight. Let me save yours. Sarah grabbed Benis's hand and they ran, bare feet slapping against the wet ground. The sound of gunfire echoed behind them. They turned a corner and ducked behind an abandoned kiosk, panting. Benis gasped. Sarah, where are we going? Sarah looked at the flash drive clutched in her palm, then at the dark road ahead. To Lagos, she said quietly, to expose the truth. Benis shook her head, terrified. But they'll kill us before we get there. Sarah's eyes hardened. Then we die trying. Behind them, the distant sound of sirens began to rise, mingling with the fading echo of gunfire. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell rang twice. Ding, ding. And for the first time, Benis realized the fight wasn't just for survival anymore. It was for redemption. The bus engine groaned as it climbed out of Ado Ekiti before dawn. The dim interior smelled of diesel, sweat, and fear. Sarah sat by the window, holding the small flash drive like her life depended on it. Beside her, Benis leaned against the seat, wrapped in a shawl that half covered her face. Her eyes were swollen from crying, but she hadn't spoken a word since they left. Outside, the world was still waking up. Dusty roads, palm trees swaying, small villages blurred past in streaks of early morning light. But inside the bus, the silence was heavy. Every time they passed a checkpoint, Sarah's heart stopped. She could still hear Inspector Jide's last words echoing in her head. If anything happens to me, give it to the press. When the bus stopped for fuel in Ondo, Sarah stepped out to buy bread and water. She looked back at the passengers and froze. A man had just boarded. He was tall, wearing a red cap. Her chest tightened. No, 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 she whispered. Benis looked up. What's wrong? Sarah's voice trembled. That man. He's one of them. I saw his face at the mansion once. He's one of the generals. Benis gripped her arm. Are you sure? Yes. General Olayinka. Amos's driver used to talk about him. The man turned slightly and looked toward them. His eyes met Sarah's for half a second, cold, deliberate. Then he smiled faintly. Sarah quickly sat back down and whispered, We can't get off now. If we run, he'll know for sure. Benis's hand trembled on her lap. Then what do we do? Sarah's jaw tightened. We wait and pray. About 2 hours later, just before entering Ogun State, the bus was stopped by police. "Routine inspection," an officer shouted. Sarah's stomach sank. 2 policemen boarded the bus and began checking ID cards. When they reached Sarah's row, the taller one paused. "You two, step outside." Benis glanced at Sarah. "Sir, what's wrong?" "Just step outside, madam," he said flatly. They obeyed. The officer gestured toward a black Toyota parked nearby. A man was leaning on it, smoking. His face was hidden under a black cap. Sarah's heart skipped. That wasn't a normal officer. The smoking man turned slowly, his lips curled into a smirk. "Mrs. Amos, and the brave maid." Benis's breath caught. "Who are you?" He stepped closer. "You can call me General Olayinka. Your husband's good friend." The same man from the bus. He had been waiting. Sarah grabbed Benis's hand. "Run." They darted toward the bush beside the highway, gunshots echoing behind them. Bullets sliced through the air. The bus passengers screamed and ducked. Sarah tripped, but Benis pulled her up. They ran deeper into the forest until their legs gave out. Hours passed. The forest grew quiet. Sarah collapsed beside a small stream, gasping for air. Her legs were bleeding from thorns. "We can't keep running like this," she whispered. Benis sat beside her, panting. Where do we go now?" Sarah wiped sweat from her forehead. "There's someone I know, a journalist. Her name is Ada. She helped me once when I escaped Ondo. If we can find her, she'll know what to do with the flash drive." Benis nodded weakly. "Where is she?" "Lagos." They both looked at the road ahead, endless, dangerous, and uncertain. By evening, after hitchhiking and walking for miles, they finally reached the outskirts of Lagos. They found Ada in a small newsroom tucked behind a printing shop in Yaba. She was a short, dark-skinned woman with fierce eyes and a calm voice. When she saw Sarah, she froze. "Sarah Ogunle. I thought you were dead." Sarah managed a tired smile. "Almost. But I have something you need to see." She handed Ada the flash drive. Ada plugged it into her laptop. The screen flickered, then displayed dozens of hidden folders, ritual videos, account transfers, member lists. Benis covered her mouth in shock. Ada's eyes widened as she clicked through the files. "Oh my God. Sarah, this is enough to bring down half the men in Abuja." "Then publish it," Sarah said firmly. Ada hesitated. "If I publish this, they'll come for me too." Sarah's voice broke. "They already killed Inspector Jide. They burned down the station. If we stay quiet, we're next." Ada looked at her, then nodded slowly. "All right, but I'll need to move fast and before they trace us." They spent the night at the newsroom. Benis finally slept for the first time in days. Sarah stayed awake, sitting by the window, watching the quiet street. At 2:43 a.m., Ada's phone rang. She picked it up quickly. "Hello?" Sarah could hear her whispering, "Yes, I have it. I'll deliver it in the morning." Something about her tone made Sarah's stomach twist. "Ada, who was that?" Ada forced a smile. "My editor, don't worry." But when she turned away, Sarah saw the reflection on the laptop screen. A message blinking. "Payment received. Location confirmed." Sarah's blood ran cold. She quietly reached for the flash drive on the table and slipped it into her pocket. By morning, Ada offered to escort them to the press office. They walked through a quiet side street, taxis honking in the distance. Then Sarah noticed 2 black SUVs turning into the road behind them. Her heart sank. "Ada, what did you do?" Ada didn't meet her eyes. "I had no choice. They found me before you came. If I didn't tell them where you were, they'd kill my son." Benis gasped. "You sold us out." "I'm sorry," Ada said, tears streaming down her face. "I didn't want this." The SUV screeched to a stop. Armed men in red bracelets jumped out. Sarah grabbed Benis's hand. "Run!" They bolted down an alley, gunshots cracking behind them. Ada shouted, "Forgive me," before one of the men shoved her into a car. Sarah and Benis darted through back streets, their lungs burning. But Lagos was awake now, traffic, noise, and chaos everywhere. They turned into a dead-end street. "No," Benis cried, "we're trapped." Sarah looked around wildly. A tall fence blocked their path. She turned back and froze. The men were already there. One of them, tall and scar-faced, smiled coldly. "The generals send their regards." Sarah stood in front of Benis, trembling but defiant. "You'll have to go through me first." The man laughed softly. "That can be arranged." He raised his gun, and a sudden loud bang echoed through the air. The man's body jerked and fell. Behind him stood Inspector Jide. Sarah gasped. "Inspector, you're alive?" He lowered his smoking gun, bleeding from his arm, but alive. "Barely. I told you I don't die easy." He helped them to their feet. "Come on, we don't have time." Benis's voice trembled. "But how did you find us?" "Tracked the signal from Ada's phone. She didn't betray you out of choice. She was blackmailed." Sarah exhaled in relief and guilt all at once, but Jide's eyes were grave. "We're not safe yet. Lagos isn't big enough to hide from these people anymore." He opened his jacket pocket and revealed a passport and a small envelope. "You two need to leave Nigeria tonight." Benis blinked. "Leave? But what about the files?" Jide smiled faintly. "I'll take care of that." Then he looked at Sarah. "You've done enough, Sarah. It's my turn now." As they headed toward a waiting taxi, Sarah stopped and looked back at him. "Inspector, what if they find you?" He gave a tired grin. "Then I'll remind them who taught them how to aim." Benis's eyes filled with tears. "You saved us twice." He shook his head. "No, the maid saved everyone." The taxi sped away, leaving Jide standing alone on the dusty street, the morning sun breaking through the smog. He turned toward the direction of the approaching sirens. Then he whispered to himself, "Let the world finally see the truth." The airport lights glimmered against the Lagos night sky. Sarah and Benis sat quietly in the back of the taxi, watching planes rise and disappear into the clouds. Their faces were tired but alive, something neither of them thought possible just days ago. Benis clutched a small brown envelope that Inspector Jide had given her. Inside were 2 passports, a wad of Naira notes, and a single note that read, "Fly, tell your story, let the world see." Sarah turned to her. "Madam, are you sure you want to leave Nigeria? What if the inspector needs help?" Benis shook her head. "If we stay, we die. If we go, we can fight in another way. With the truth." The taxi pulled up at the international terminal. They got out, their steps unsteady but determined. Neither of them noticed the black SUV that stopped 2 lanes behind. They were halfway to the check-in counter when the chaos began. Screams, gunshots, panic. People dove for cover as men in red bracelets stormed into the terminal, firing into the air. Sarah grabbed Benis and pulled her behind a column. Her heart pounded so loud she could barely hear. "It's them," Benis whispered. "The generals." Sarah peeked out. There were 4 men, one holding a walkie-talkie. "Secure the exits. They must not board that plane." Benis's hand trembled. "Sarah, I can't do this anymore." Sarah turned sharply. "Yes, you can. You survived a man who wanted your blood. You can survive this." Her voice was fierce, a strength born from fear and faith mixed together. Suddenly, one of the airport doors burst open, and Inspector Jide limped in with a team of armed officers. "Drop your weapons," he shouted. The generals turned, startled. Gunfire erupted again. Passengers screamed and scattered. Sarah shielded Benis, crouching behind a counter as bullets ricocheted around them. Jide ducked behind a luggage cart, firing carefully. "Get them out," he yelled at one of his men. 2 officers rushed forward, covering Sarah and Benis as they dashed toward the emergency exit. "Move, move, move." They reached a side corridor, but one of the generals, a tall, bald man with a serpent tattoo on his arm, stepped into their path. He aimed his gun at Benis. "You thought you could expose us?" he sneered. "You're just a trophy wife." Sarah didn't think twice. She picked up a metal pole lying by the wall and swung it with all her strength. Clang! The pole struck the man's arm, the gun flew out of his hand, and he fell to his knees with a roar of pain. Sarah raised the pole again, her eyes blazing. "I may be a maid, but I'm not your sacrifice." She hit him once more, and he crumpled to the floor. By the time the firing stopped, 3 of the generals were dead, and 2 had been captured. Jide limped over, breathing hard. "It's over," he said softly. "They won't hurt anyone again." Benis collapsed into a chair, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Inspector, thank you." Jide smiled faintly. "Don't thank me. Thank Sarah. She saved you, me, and half of Nigeria." Sarah looked down, embarrassed. "I just did what I had to do." But Jide wasn't done. He held up a small flash drive, identical to the one Sarah had carried. "The files have already been sent to the national press and international agencies," he said. "By tomorrow morning, every news station in the country will know who the generals are." Benis's eyes widened. "You mean—" "Yes," Jide said. "Their reign of fear is finished." The next day, the world woke up to the headlines splashed across every major screen. "The generals exposed. Billionaire cult network unmasked." Video clips played everywhere. Amos's confession, the footage from the airport, the names of politicians, pastors, and businessmen who had joined the dark group. Crowds filled the streets demanding justice. Churches and mosques prayed for deliverance. For the first time, people in Ekiti spoke Amos's name with shame, not fear. Benis and Sarah watched the news from a quiet guest house in Ghana where they had been moved for safety. Benis's hand shook as she held a cup of tea. "It's over," she whispered. "It's really over." Sarah smiled gently. "No, madam, it's only the beginning." Weeks later, Benis stood at the front of a small press conference in Accra. She looked radiant, dressed in a simple white dress, her hair neatly tied, her voice calm but strong. Behind her was a banner that read, "The Redemption Foundation, fighting ritual killings and exploitation in Africa." Reporters filled the hall, cameras flashed. Benis took a deep breath. "I was once blind to the evil around me. I lived in a mansion built on the pain of others. But one woman, a maid named Sarah, risked her life to open my eyes." The crowd murmured softly. Sarah stood quietly at the back of the room, wearing a plain blue gown, her head bowed humbly. Benis continued, her voice trembling with emotion. "This foundation will fight for every girl used and forgotten, for every poor soul crushed under the greed of men like Amos. Because silence is the real curse, and we will never be silent again." The audience clapped. Some stood, a few cried. After the conference, Sarah joined Benis outside the hall. The afternoon sun was golden. "Madam," Sarah said softly, "you spoke like a queen." Benis smiled, touching her shoulder. "You're the real queen here, Sarah. Without you, I wouldn't be alive." Sarah laughed lightly. "You know, back home, people said maids like me were born to serve. But maybe serving doesn't mean kneeling. Maybe it means standing for what's right." Benis nodded, eyes glistening. "Then we'll stand together." They walked toward the car, waiting to take them back to the hotel. On the way, Sarah stopped and looked up at the sky. "Do you think Inspector Jide is safe?" she asked quietly. Benis smiled. "Wherever he is, I'm sure he's watching the news with that little grin of his." Sarah chuckled. "He'd probably say, 'You hit like a soldier.'" They both laughed, the first genuine laughter they'd shared in months. Months later, the Redemption Foundation became one of the fastest-growing humanitarian movements in West Africa. Benis used her wealth to build shelters for orphans and women escaping abuse. Sarah became its first director. Newspapers called her the Maid who saved a nation. One morning, as she walked through the foundation's new headquarters, Sarah paused before a framed photograph on the wall, a picture of Inspector Jide smiling beside his team. Below it were his words, engraved in brass. "Courage doesn't mean the absence of fear. It means standing tall even when fear surrounds you." Sarah smiled, tears filling her eyes. She whispered, "We did it, Inspector. We really did." Then she turned toward the busy office, filled with volunteers and laughter. The future felt bright again. Outside, the city lights of Accra shone like stars reborn. Proof that even in the darkest nights, the light of truth always finds a way. Please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more amazing videos.